Today I'm going to help you make the best open field marches possible in Rise of Kingdoms, whether you field 3 marches because you're a newer player or you're all the way up to 7 because you've been around for a while and you're a high spender. These are, in my opinion, the best marches you can run. And if you're subscribed to the channel, you know you can use the timestamps to jump to whichever part you'd like, including the talent checkup, which will be toward the end of the video. We're going to talk about formations in this video. We're going to talk a little bit about the value of the investments you make in this game. And a big thank you to the makers of the game, the makers of Rise of Kingdoms, for sponsoring today's video. So let's get started here with the best march in the game and the best 3 marches you really should make if you're either a very low spender and you've been around for a while and just don't have that many sculptures, or you're just getting to the end game is the more likely scenario, all right? And the best march in the game is still QSH. This commander's cracked. Absolutely insane. Who do you pair with? Either Zhuge Liang, if you're making only 1 archer march, or if you're just getting to the end game, Yisong is like amazing. Yisong is amazing, okay? I use QSH with Yisong because I put my Zhuge Liang with my 2nd archer march. So when I run Canyon, I run it with the QSH and Zhuge Liang. If I'm fighting in the field, I'm probably going to end up using 2 archer marches, and I'm using QSH and Yisong. The reason that these both work is that, you know, QSH is just busted. Zhuge Liang has an amazing debuff and does great circle AoE damage, and also, you know, shrugs off enemy debuffs and so on. Yisong is really powerful for his enhanced skill damage. Both of them work with the QSH. The second best march you can make is either going to be the infantry or the cavalry. Honestly, I'm not sure which it is. They're both very good. For cavalry, it's going to be Arthur, who you're going to pair. Hello, tier maker. Anytime now. Oh my god, I broke tier maker. It took me a minute to get that sorted out. Anyways, it's going to be Arthur paired with Achilles. All right. Achilles is very strong, good AoE damage. This march is a glass cannon, but it's going to do a lot of damage on its way out. Formation-wise, obviously at this time, Delta formation is the play. That is your only combo formation. We know we're getting a new one. Exactly what it's going to do, we don't know. Is it rally garrison as a field? We don't know. So you got some amount of risk starting that formation now, but this is the way to go. It's the best march you can make for cavalry, hands down. And of course, it's wedge for archers currently, but I expect a new formation for archers is imminent, so brace for impact. Now, with regard to infantry, we've got 2 commanders that we know work together really well. It's BQ and Liu Che. Absolutely outstanding. If I was making only 3 marches, these are the 3 that I'm going to make. All right. Now, when we get to 5 marches, we got some interesting options. I will point out that at any point along the way, you can kind of use the new siege commanders together, whether that's at 4 marches or 5 marches or 6 or 7. You could always use them as sort of like flex. And I will point out that siege have moments where they're absolutely cracked and moments where, I mean, the kingdoms I've been in say don't use them because we're traveling large distances and it's not what you should use. So the times where they're cracked, they're cracked. The times where they're not all that relevant or not as strong, you know, keep them benched. In my small account, you know, I could consider making a 6th march as a siege march. On my big account, I should probably have 8 viable marches, including a siege march that I swap in when appropriate, but I'm going to leave that there for now. We'll move it around and bump it out when the time comes, but a siege march is a powerful tool in the toolkit. Okay, with that said, if I'm going to 5 marches today, then what I want to do is not make a 2nd archer march. I don't think there's anything worth doing with a 2nd archer march, unfortunately. I mean, I love Hermann Prime, love Zhuge Liang. I like these commanders, but I can't get it to perform, okay? So I would say what you want is a 2nd cav march for sure and a 2nd infantry march. If I'm making a 2nd infantry march, I mean, I can just tell you that Ragnar Prime with Skippy Prime is still incredible. It still is great for me. Should you start investing in this now? No. But if we talk about like the best you can do currently, I think it's still on that list for infantry. But I think what is stronger is the cav split. In other words, the second cav march is almost certainly the most powerful thing you can do right now. And that means you need to split the Achilles and the Arthur. I think that bringing in Philip is a pretty good plan. So Arthur Philip. And with regard to who you pair with Achilles, it's GG. You could have either as the primary, it's going to work. All right. So if I'm making 5 marches, this is how I would split it up. Now, the way that KVKs work kind of today, if you're spending enough, you can have 6 marches right out the gate for your first zone fight. So a lot of people will have 6 marches immediately. In that case, what would I do? I mean, personally, I have options with leadership marches, but what I would say, generally speaking, if someone is making 6 marches for their account, you should have 2 of each troop type. I think 2 archers, 2 cavalry, 2 infantry, even though 2 archers isn't meta now, in my opinion. The devs have got to make that a good decision, right? Like they have to get us to that point. And I believe that they will. So, if I'm making a second archer march, I think the game plan is some combination of Zhuge Liang or Herman or Ashurbanipal. I'm probably doing Zhuge Liang with Herman Prime as my choices here. And the other thing you can consider that I've seen people do is they say, well, I'm putting my Philip over here, baby. They go Zhuge Philip. You could then bring in commanders like William as a secondary for Arthur. And I think 2 combo formations is the way to go. I don't really think that Huo with Arthur is the play currently, but I will say that there are some number of people that just have wedge armaments for calves, and that's just what they're going to do. I would not say that that's meta, okay? But I think a lot of people are going to do it until we see what the new cav combo situation is. So I'm gonna leave Huo there. Remember, he has to be the primary if you're going to use him that way. And I'm going to bring him back up, because if we're talking about what I'm going to do when I go to 6 marches, it might look something like this. The other thing that I do is a weird leadership infantry situation. I don't know how much people even want to hear about that anymore. So it's like, I don't know. If you have a leadership set, what are you doing? Is a question that a lot of people do need answers for. And I'll be honest with you, like, what is the state of leadership in the game? I really am not sure. I think maybe they're releasing open field leadership every other year, because I guess they don't want open field leadership gear to be really a thing. And if they did release an open field leadership commander every year, then it might be meta for some people to have multiple open field leadership sets. But they did just release Hector, but I just don't even think he's that good in the open field. So I can't, I want to be able to know and predict what leadership is doing, and I just can't figure it out. But what I would say is that I have found really good success using the Philip primary and BQ secondary. And then in the open field, this works really well. That lets me buff lots of other marches, right? So if you are going that route, you need another infantry commander. You've got options here. What I have often done is Wallace with Liu Che. There's also the Liu Che with Alex plan, but ever since the release of pincer formation, that became less of a thing. So, you could use Arch and use that composition. You could also still just use pincer, I guess. But this is what I end up doing in the open field on my big account. Something like this, okay? When I run 7 marches, and I have 3 infantry, but it's this slant to the leadership. If you're not doing that, okay, then if you're going to run 3 infantry marches, you've got a couple choices here. And I'm not sure how I feel about this mobile version of Tier Maker. but whatever. So one option here, if you're running 3 infantry, is going to be to use BQ with Wallace. You've got your like Liuche Alex, which does a lot of work. I'll mention that you could bring CJ into the mix if you really wanted. There's also Hector you could use as a secondary in this context. Like, there's a lot of ways you could kind of move around where your infantry are, especially if you have Philip, you could bump around. So, people were very bullish on Liuche with Philip because Philip has instant proc damage. Liuche does combo attacks that gives you more opportunities to trigger that damage and lower rage. A lot of ways you could kind of slice it up with 3 infantry and have a dang good time. All right, this infantry have a lot of options. I mean, if I had to pick now who has the best options for 3 marches, I think it's the infantry. Okay, I really do feel the infantry has the edge here for choices. I also feel like Hector is very weak with infantry, generally, but I think you want 1 wedge march for the time being. I don't think wedge is a part of the future. Skill damage is a part of the future for infantry. At some point, that's going to phase out, but I think that somehow Ragnar Prime with Skippy Prime still holds on. The debuffs are still good. The AoE skill damage is good. The instant proc shielding is great. Instant proc damage over time is nice. There's just too much that's working there. And I know that people really scrutinize to the nth degree whatever sort of choices I make here. So I need to be a little bit careful of saying, like, is BQ with Wallace like really the pick? I don't know. I mean, you'd have to do some of your own testing in the field to see which of these compositions works best. I'm not excited about Wallace. I'm not excited about Hector. And I know that Philip with BQ is not exciting, but I think some combination of those infantry that you see and that I've talked about based on your formations is going to work great. All right. Now this brings us to, okay, Chisgule, what about a 3 cav situation? I don't even know if I'm going to show you a 3 archer situation, by the way. Like, I'm honestly not even sure. Can I recommend a 3 archer situation? I think the answer is like just straight no. But let's get the 3 cavalry and try to figure this out, all right? So we know that we use GG Achilles, and that's just like, we don't have to think anymore. And if we're going to 3 calves, then I would say Arthur with William or Philip is an amazing choice. And then you've got your Huo, presumably, and you're going to do some skill damage stuff. You're probably, at that point, going to bring in a commander like Joan. Do I like this? No. I really kind of don't. Huo with Arthur did poorly for me. And Arthur's the GOAT. So I'm not in love with this 3 cav config. I feel like it would be really amazing if we could get to like a 3x delta setup, but I'm not sure there's like a great way to make 3 cavalry combo marches. Maybe there is. I know if you're in an artifact KVK, Attila with Liuche is really quite good. Shockingly good. That just hits. And I've seen the reports and I'm like, okay, I am a believer in an artifact KVK that you can use the Attila Liuche. So like, maybe there's a world in which we bring in the Attila and we can get something to cook with the 3 cav marches. Yeah, I mean, this match is what I said about 2 weeks ago when I indicated that like probably your best option is to be in an artifact KVK if you really want to run the 3 calves. But otherwise, I think you need a skill damage march. I just don't like it. And I think something like this, you could, I guess, use Nevsky Joan if you prefer. Some people do. But the 2 combo setup with some flavor of who you want to pair with Arthur William is very glass cannon. Philip buffs the rest of your team, but you might put Philip somewhere else already. And Hector is, in my opinion, kind of mid for field. And then some skill damage march, right? And of course, GG Achilles. And you don't even mess with that. Don't think. For 3 archers, like I don't know, man. You got to bring in Shajar, I guess. And maybe you're doing something like this. I don't love it. I'm not even aware of like a great way to get Hector in the mix if you're using 3 archers, which is like really weird. So, yeah, that's where I think I'm at. If you've got either a leadership march, what I think the best way is to run that. If you've got the infantry, the cavalry, or the archers. Let's do the talent checkup real quick and talk about some of the best talents to use in the open field. We can start with the cavalry, since I think those talents are honestly like the easiest. If you're doing the like skill damage, which most people I think have graduated from, or are in the process of graduating from, or are waiting for the new formation to show up to see if it's maybe better than Delta. This would be your wedge setup. All right. So if you are using the 3 marches and you need wedge, or you're waiting patiently for some new formation, there you go. For combo, I really like this setup right here. Okay. Hits hard. I run it down in the field, so I want to take less damage when I get low. And the only thing you could do as a sort of variation here is this little trick like so. Theoretically, if you were only using, like, for example, Arthur William, this could be kind of spicy because you're not really as much interested in iron and steel whenever you launch a combo attack. You only have one commander doing combo stuff, so you're less interested in the extra combos. The idea that you could go in and reduce their attack is kind of interesting. It's an interesting debuff. I don't know. I just run it like this, man. I run it like this. I don't overthink it. And then, yeah, wow, actually, Cav is like really easy. That is the same sort of thing you'd use, by the way, over here that you'd use if you ran Achilles primary, or I think if you ran GG primary, who I will certainly be maxing soon on my main account, but I don't need to yet, so I'm chilling. Maybe I'll get some more sculptures of him at a very low cost. Maybe I'll get another wheel. All right, so this brings us to archers, and I made an entire video about what to do with QSH. Depending on whether or not you have a horn and you have other ways of generating rage, like I run a leadership march that buffs with rage, or you're using war drums that are buffing with rage, and then there's all these different ways to buff rage. All of that is going to influence whether or not you take Feral Nature, whether or not you take Razor Sharp. All right, so there's a lot of nuance there. I made a dedicated video about that. I'll have a card in the end screen for that very detailed video. If you want something very standard to use on Zhuge Liang or Ashurbanipal, here's what I've got for my open field build. This is what I would recommend. Standard stuff. You're going for the rage opportunities here, and the bonus to skill damage. More rage, more damage. Really, it's attack, but leads to damage, right? And if you're using Hermann Prime as the primary, which is not something I would particularly recommend, but if you were doing it for some reason, I mean, I do this on my restart account in Canyon, but that's because I don't even have a 6th set of gear on my small account. It's a weird situation. This is what I'm running. All right. Now, with regard to your infantry, oh baby, pretty standard stuff. Been talking about these talents for a while, so I won't dwell on them for too long. But your Ragnar Prime, again, I think this is going to go the way of the Dodo, but it's still good now, is to use this build here. Now, this is a variation from what I used to do, okay? What I used to do is this build here, minimizing damage taken. And for a pure Canyon setup, this is going to do a little bit better. But for open field speed, I'm finding this is better, and I'm finding I need the speed. So a speedy field build is what I'm using now, and it makes me mad to have to use it, but the reality is, like, if everybody else is using it and you're slower, then you're definitely going to get caught. And if you're the one who gets caught, like, Hey, you don't have to be the fastest one. You just need to not be the slowest one. I ended up being the slowest one like this. Sucks to suck. All right. With regard to talents on, let's see, BQ. Here's what I'm running. All right. Debatable whether or not you would run to the bitter end. In fact, for open field, I'm almost certainly going to run a speed variation. So we could just go and kind of build that now. But a speed variation is going to get these talents. Have to have them. I want these normal attack damage talents. And I probably want every bit of march speed I can get. So I have 3 talent points left. I mean, depending on whether or not you think you're staying in combat, you could get to the bitter end. Or you could go with stats. But if you need to be speedy, I think that's probably what you end up doing. You could theoretically carve off some of the Thunderous Smite and to the bitter end to go for Hold the Line. But Hold the Line is becoming less and less popular to make yourself more tanky. But for Canyon, I think this is obviously really quite nice. All right, it's doing all the things you want. Here's your field build. Here's another variation of a field build I did that's got only 2 points in the march speed and gets Hold the Line. But as I mentioned, I just feel like more and more that you just need all the speed. And if you don't have speed, you get caught. And if you're the guy that gets caught, it sucks to suck, and boy does it suck. From there, we need to talk about Liu Che. All right, Liu Che talents. This is what I've been running. Haven't thought about it ever. I literally have not thought about this, and I don't even know how long. I do have a Canyon build here, which has slightly more stats and slightly less march speed. And if you're putting him in front, you don't want to be like taking lots of damage. That's, I think, why I did that. But this is my field build, and I honestly haven't thought about this in ages. And then for Philip in the field, if you use him as the primary, I'm using a different version than I used to. This is a march speed manipulation variant. I'm mono trooping, and if I'm using active skills a lot, then theoretically this march speed reduction should really matter and be really cool. Is it actually? You know, we could have a conversation, but this is what I'm using for open field. All right. And I'm still going with this whenever you use an active skill, gain 20% defense. Obviously, he's using extra activations of active skills. So I want to take advantage of that with more slows, big AoE slows, 5 enemies. 25% march speed is not noticeable, but theoretically it should be. And then, you know, the defense boost is crucial. So that's my game plan. And I'm boosting normal damage because I'm pairing with BQ. All right. I think that covered all the commanders. I guess if you're using Attila and an artifact KVK, here you go. I've enjoyed this build for quite a while, but what is this set for? This is with Nevsky to rally. Whoa. This is probably where it's at. This is a more flexible build. Yeah, I would say this is more of the field build I'd be looking to run. Nevsky Rally. This lets you know how long ago I touched Attila. Oh my God. That's crazy. That is so crazy. I think this is where I'm at this point. I almost want to just switch him so I don't like forget, but yeah, you get the idea. Awesome. You enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here, subscribe. If you want the detailed QSH talents, I'll have the card in the end screen for that video. And I promised you one other one. I can't remember what it was. Oh, my dedicated cav vid. You want to go off the deep end for cavalry on equipment and other things? That card will be up top over there as well. All right. Until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies. Take care, everybody.